Welcome everyone to the newest installment of the GMP Hot Seat. It's been quite a break since the last session, and I'm happy to re-announce the reintroduction of this webcast series. And very happy to introduce our special guest, Bob McDowall, who we're gonna have introduce himself just shortly. The title of this particular webcast or GMP Hot Seat is going to be Annex 11: The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, a polite discussion on these factors. So, yeah, with that said, Bob, Annex 11 has gone from 4 to 17 pages, and similar situation with the GMP Chapter 4. The good, the bad of and the ugly of this expansion of the regulation.
It is I think a major problem. It's gone from what essentially is a prescriptive, it's gone to a prescriptive regulation from an interpretive regulation. The issue is if you've got a situation, the regulation should say what you have to do, and it leaves you to interpret each individual company how you interpret it. And the inspectors come in to check to see that what you've done matches how they want it, whether it matches the regulation. We've gone with Annex 11 and Chapter 4 to an awful lot of detail of what they want you to do, which I think is totally wrong.
Oh, totally wrong. Those are strong words.
Totally wrong.
Okay.
Actually, let's go back 20 years to the case of the FDA versus Utah Medical, because there the judge said, apart from all roads lead to Rome, US regulations, although it was medical device, it was saying they have the benefit of generality and the vice of imprecision. But it allows you to fit the regulation to what you're doing. Are you making solid dosage forms, or are you making advanced therapy medicinal products? And you want that flexibility. And one of the other things, when I gave the first Annex 11 2011 training course with Karl-Heinz Mengers, who led the inspectors working group for Part 11, for Annex 11. That was a Freudian slip. He was saying that I've got chamomile tea producers that I have to inspect.
Yeah.
Through to ATMPs. Are you going to apply the same thing? And that's part of the problem, that they've gone way overboard saying what you're gone.
Yeah.
But see what let me take a particular case in point. I may be answering some of your later questions, but if you go to the requirement in Section 11, Clause 5 about passwords.
Yeah.
Now it says in there passwords have to be long. Don't have a problem with that. Fully agree. But then it says you got to have them uppercase, lowercase, special character, number. That's wrong. It goes on further to say that what you really want to have is if you also have to check that individual dictionary words are excluded from for the password. Now, if you go to your neck of the woods with the National Institute of Science and Technology, they have produced a series of special publication 800 series from their computer security lab. And in a document that was published in 2017 and updated in July, which is NIST Special Publication 800, SB 800 63B4, don't ask me why. It goes into Annex Appendix 1, and it says that we've reviewed breaches, software password breaches, and we've looked through, and the complexity is actually less impactful. People still break in. And the other problem is, how well do people remember complex passwords?
Yeah.
The simple answer is they don't.
Yeah.
So what it says in the recommendations is that users choose their own password. Minimum 15 characters. There are no other requirements. So you can have uppercase, lowercase, but it's up to the user to define. And there is no expiry, with two exceptions, I should say. One, if you forget it, but you will have something that you will make memorable. I mean, in my case, I use postcodes where I used to live 50 years ago when there was no internet, cars that I learnt to drive in, cars that my scout leader crashed, things like that. And they've been written off. So I can string things together very, very easily, and I can remember them.
Yeah.
I mean, you could take and then the only other point would be if there's a compromise with the password, and everyone's got to change them. It also goes further and says you take the password in its entirety. You don't chop it up and look at individual words. So what's written apart from password length, what's written in NISP in 11.5 is, quite frankly, according to NIST IT special practices, can I use the word rubbish?
You can, yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
We don't really use that word too much over here, but we know what it means. Yeah. So, as I was reading
I also have a fire extinguisher if necessary, just in case the GMP hot seat gets a little bit
well
hot.
done. Yeah.
And if necessary,
Yeah.
if it gets really, really hot, I've got these bullshit deflectors just to be on the safe side.
All right. Well done. Okay,
It's
we'll
going to get
discuss
a lot
later whether I
worse,
have
Pete.
to edit that out. Okay, all right.
No.
Nice. Oh, okay. So, so I want to start actually, I want to go back. So we introduced the topic today, but I want to talk a little bit about your journey. So Bob, who are you and how did you get to where you are now, which is a prominent voice in the world of GXP laboratory compliance? Can you give us that story? And with the idea that as far back as you want to go, but with the goal of sort of trying to provide here a roadmap, maybe for folks who are interested in doing similar things, like to become a prominent voice in industry and in whatever area they might choose to focus in. So this is going to lead into like, hey, here's some advice for folks that might be new professionals here on the line.
Okay. Let's go back to when I was at school. We had individual science. So we came through general science first 2 years in senior school, and then we had chemistry, biology, and physics. And we had a new teacher that arrived who was very influential in the way that I developed my interest in chemistry. And he was a PhD, where we didn't have many people with other than first degrees and masters, and he was very approachable and very encouraging. And from there I went on to do chemistry, physics, biology for the next level, and then I ended up going to university in Newcastle upon Tyne, where I studied biochemistry. And coming out of that, perhaps in parallel, I should say, my father was a policeman and would also talk about some of the cases that he had seen. And I started getting very interested in forensic. So coming to the end of my degree course, I either wanted to do a PhD or to do forensic science. And the potential advert for forensic science was sent to my old address in Newcastle with an accent like this, I live in London. And I ended up working for a mail order company as a temporary job. And then I saw an advert for a research associate or research assistant at the London Hospital Medical College doing forensic toxicology and the opportunity to study for a PhD. So I got the opportunity to do two in one and get paid for it, which was even better.
No kidding.
And I started my PhD supervisor was Anne Robinson. She was very professional. She also got an awful lot of crap thrown at her by the pathologists in the department and handled it remarkably well. And she would allow me time to work on things and very encouraging. And we also started to publish and go to scientific meetings. And it was the ability to publish that started getting me interested in writing.
Okay.
And it got to a point where she had applied for a job in Toronto, and it was a race between me finishing my PhD and her emigrating to Canada. I won by 3 weeks. So I started, and one of the things she did before she left is that she put me in contact with the editor of the Journal of Pharmacy and Pharmacology so we could publish the main elements of the PhD. And I spent some time writing this up. I went to see John Fowler, who was the editor, and he was the epitome of a English gentleman as he eviscerated my prose, but very, very politely. And I learnt an awful lot from that man. And but it also helped me focus and develop further. And when I've edited journals, I've tried to take the same approach to people as well. I edited a couple of journals, and it's really trying to help other people as you develop yourself. I also I worked there. I also met my wife, not in the mortuary, I would hasten to add, in the serology section. So I was doing my forensic toxicology, so I always introduced myself as having a PhD in death, which which opens up the opportunity for people to have lunch with me or dinner. We'll see how that goes. But it's actually it's a nice way to engage, if you're doing a presentation, to engage with the audience and try and make it a little more personal rather than just standing up and talking. At the end of the job, at the end of when Anne left, they closed the section I was in, and I was transferred to from the medical college to the hospital, and I was going to be faced with another 3 to 5 years of studying if I wanted to stay in clinical chemistry. So I was looking for something alternative. And as I lived in North London at the time, we had the pharmaceutical belt where we had SmithKline and French, Beecham's, Glaxo, and a few other companies. And I ended up getting a job at SmithKline and French. And we started going to more conferences, started writing up some of our work, and we were able to get into automation, laboratory information management systems. I edited the first book on the subject. I ran a week's course with several other people. We had something like 70 people attend on LIMS for the Royal Society of Chemistry. So it gave me an opportunity to talk to people, to present. At this point, I was very influenced by Ray Dessy at Virginia Tech. Unfortunately, Ray's died about the same time as Anne did. But he was also very influential on some of the thinking. I was able to get one co-authored and one sole named articles in the A pages of Analytical Chemistry. And then after 10 years at SmithKline, actually, I should say that I ended up in 1987 getting an invitation to give a main lecture at an international conference in Barcelona. I thought, this is great. First night I was in Barcelona, I spent 4 hours in the Spanish police station because as you do, because the colleague I was with had a bag stolen and we had to report it. And and we had to wait till an English-speaking policeman came in. But the aim at the end of 10 years, SmithKline were running into cash flow problems because of Zantac competition from Glaxo, and they closed our section down, or closed the site, virtually the site down. And I was being made redundant. I got a job at Wellcome, so I had to move to Southeast London where I live now. And I was there for 5 years. I had very good support from my head of department and his boss, but there were a number of changes made and departments were merged. And at the end of I had a group of 20 odd people. And when they merged and everything else, I ended up with 2 people. And I'm thinking, why should I bother?
Mm.
So at this point, I had edited the first book on LIMS. I know a number of people, and I decided I would set up as a consultant. And one of my friends had just joined PricewaterhouseCoopers, and he said, "I'll get your first job, but if you if you want to keep it, it's entirely up to you." So I was involved in a few large projects with Coopers and Lybrand, then Pricewaterhouse, but I was also picking up jobs of myself. When I set up the business, I said, I'm going to do LIMS, lab automation, and I'm not going to bother with computer validation. It's a bit boring. I said to my wife, within 6 weeks, I was doing computer validation because I'd been doing it at SmithKline as a consultant. So what I found was that people were not getting into computer validation particularly well. But the critical thing was, in 15 years working in the industry, I never read one regulation. It was always interpreted for me. I was there in 1978 when GLP came in, because I've got a GLP background, even though I work in GMP and GCP now, as well as GLP. But it was really, I never read the regulations. But when you're on your own, you've got to, because otherwise, how can you help people or defend what they're doing if you don't have a knowledge of the actual regulations? Compare SmithKline's approach. We had one file that thick of all the SOPs. You go to welcome, and we've got this much, and it's different companies' interpretations. One of the things I like doing is training people, and I was given opportunities to run training courses. And the one thing I try not to do is actually say, oh, it's so difficult, you need a consultant. I take the opposite approach. You can do this if you put your mind to it. You don't need a consultant unless you want to do something totally different or verify what you're going to do. I think that's important. But why am I outspoken? I can't stand idiots at times.
Okay.
Present company excluded, of course.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Oh, that's funny.
It's trying to. We have a Scottish comedian called Billy Connolly, and he has a class of people, which probably shouldn't be said, but a class of people stupid but savable. I think it's people that want help. I'm not saying they're stupid, but people that want help. That's important. They've got to realize they've got a problem and they want to help get something solved. And that is why I like being a consultant. I suppose it goes with 30 years of being in the Scout movement. Help other people. You know, you take a philosophy like that. But I don't know whether that's a ramble that you would be that is particularly worth keeping in or keeping out.
I appreciate that background. That's, one thing I sort of saw coming through in your session just there, that is similar with other conversations with other folks I've had, is the importance of mentorship in our industry, because of the highly regulated nature. Sometimes, the interpretation that's necessary. It takes this time to develop the way, like, pathways of thinking that are both make a business sense as well as compliance sense. It's a very difficult balance to get those correct.
Monica's on the course. I've been mentoring her for best over a year now. There's 3 or 4 other people I mentor. I think it's important that you what concerns me more than anything else is the industry is de-skilling at an enormous rate. You've got comments that you get people that have a lot of experience, and then they make them redundant. They make them an offer they dare not refuse for pension or whatever, and the knowledge walks out the door. What also is a problem is that the universities are not training people in the same way that they used to. And you get the point that the computer is always right. The computer says yes, it must be right.
Mm.
You don't get that. You don't get that feedback that, or gives you the warm feeling that people know what they're doing. I think it was also the fact that when you look at some of the instrument companies, and I speak as a lab person,
Mm-hmm.
you see there was something on LinkedIn a few months ago where a company said, "Oh, you can install and run this system, install and run it yourself. Oh, and if you're working in pharma, you can have the Part 11 option." And what worries me is that actually you should be giving the universities the Part 11 option to train people in data integrity.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're not, if they want to delete data, they can't do it. They've got to manage and keep things. Because if you get to a point, oh, this is no good, oh, we'll just delete it, that's not the right thing. Why has it gone wrong? Why are you doing something this way? But that's, as I say, that's more my my approach on things.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I want to introduce right now your book that you published back in 2019. Hopefully
And
you can.
I'm not even paying you for this.
That's true. After I'll send
Thank
you
you
an email.
very much.
So this is the name of the book, Data Integrity and Data Governance, right? You wrote this actually back in 2019. The Royal Society for Chemistry was the publication company, and you have a whole section in there on data governance, which is interesting because at that time it really hadn't been introduced too many places other than maybe just the PICS guidance as a draft. You make
Well,
a statement.
actually, it was
Yeah.
going to be called initially data governance and data integrity. And I was speaking with a friend and he said, actually, no, it won't sell because no one knows what data governance is. So I swapped it around.
Yeah, it flows better too, data integrity and governance.
Yes.
It feels better. It's a better
Yes.
title.
Yes.
Yeah.
He did the right thing.
Yeah, so I see this, I read this. This book has had a big impact on me and has made its way
Oh,
into a lot of the slides and material that I use in training for sure. Because the way I read it, the way I see it is, we had this PICS guidance in 2019, which was drafted and quite pretty extensive for a guidance document, to be fair.
yeah.
But of course, we're talking about much more detail here in your book about almost like
It's a door stopper.
the why, right? So the how and the why, and a lot of the background behind the regulation. So if you haven't picked up a copy of this, I highly recommend it. But you make some interesting statements in the book, which is not to be, which is not, just unsurprising, I should say. Some very bold statements on data governance. For example, on page 82, you say FDA shows no interest in data governance.
At the time I wrote
That took me back.
If you look at the pathway of the the CGMP and CGMP and data integrity guidance. In 2016, they had no mention of senior management.
Mm.
It was only thrown in December 2018, which I think, I'm trying to remember. I think I finished the edits. I finished editing the proofs, actually floating around Spitsbergen archipelago in the June of 2018, and it's RSC published it 2019. So the statement actually is true. because it was in December 2018 that they added in the background, oh, by the way, senior management is responsible for all of this and the strategies.
Yeah.
But I still feel that CGMP guidance should have a few more questions in it about the role of senior management.
Okay.
And that's where I think, and the other thing, and you're right to pick me up, I do make bold statements because I write the questions of quality column and have over 32, 33 years now in LCGC, and it started off in LCGC International, then it became LCGC Europe, and now it's back to LCGC International for the last 2 years. But I write that in a way that I don't mind whether you agree with me or disagree with me, but I want you to think about it. So if I write something that's wishy-washy, I will write something definitive, and it reflects my thinking at the time I wrote it. I reserve the right always to change my opinion because I could be totally wrong. But the point here is that I write something, and at the time I wrote that, and even now I think that's fairly true. There's very little evidence from FDA in terms of their guidance documents in pharma that says data governance. It's really focused on data integrity.
Yeah.
So do you want another little secret about the book?
Sure.
Do you know the reason I wrote it?
I do not.
It is based on one bloody awful diagram in the GAMP Records and Data Integrity Guide, because I moaned like hell through the review process because their data life cycle is so abysmal. Because it's a little 5-step diagram. And what really upset me is they lumped review use into one set. They didn't separate. Review is so important. And because they like little diagrams, I decided to write my own book. And so if you look at one diagram, pissed me off that much. And if you
spent years writing a book.
I didn't spend that long. Listen, the Data Integrity Guide came out in 2017. I finished it within a year, and it was published in 2019.
Quite the story. Again, a little bit unsurprising, to be honest. But
I should probably sell little effigies of me to the GAMP forum because I've managed to piss them off more than once, I suspect.
Yes, I also have my daily struggles with some of the stuff in the GAMP guidance documents. In my opinion, one of the biggest sources of pain in our industry, stemming from those series of guidance documents. But I won't get into that. If a regulator sits down at your, let's say, HPLC system, because I know that's one of your favorite laboratory instruments, what documentation should you have available now to demonstrate what these regulators in GMP Chapter 4 are calling a data governance system, which is also outlined in Chapter 4 of your book?
You did give me a clue last week that you were going to ask me these questions, and have I done any revision? No, I haven't, he says. So this is
the hot seat. There's no preparation involved.
Fire extinguisher at the ready. Anyway, the key thing there is, firstly, what I would see is a cascade coming down from senior management. This is where, and if you look in the book, you'll see a data integrity model. And that data integrity model is like building a house. The first thing is the foundation. No foundation, the house falls down. So there is a foundation. the ethos, the integrity, the training, but 2 words: management leadership. So it all stems from the boardroom. If there's not someone there, whatever you spend, give to my grandson, because he'll throw it away far faster than any corporation will. The key point here is that it starts and ends with management, and it's a journey, not an event. So management start, and you can have all the procedures, all the training, all the QA involvement. If you haven't won the hearts and minds of people, then, and you tell them what behaviors you want and what behaviors are banned, then you've got a major problem, because people need to know. At a certain company that you were in, when you had your FDA hat on, and visited, and I ended up picking up the pieces after your visit, and your cozy little chat. Management produced we produced a policy for data integrity, signed by management. And the problem was, you had to, in terms of training people, I gave the training and I wanted a questionnaire to check understanding. And they didn't want to do it. We had this fundamental disagreement because they just wanted someone, you get the training and then you sign off, I've understood this.
Yeah.
And that's wrong. And one of the critical things that I think is important is that you need, because if you've signed it to say, yeah, I understand it, and then you're caught doing something wrong, you can always turn around and say, well, I didn't really understand it. Management made me sign it. On the other hand, if you've got a questionnaire and you've filled it out and you've got you've passed it, and now you've signed you haven't got a hope in hell of getting out of that, because here's the evidence. The other thing is that in both, in Annex 11 and part of the new Chapter 4, they don't, certainly in Annex 11, they don't really emphasize the need for verifying the training is understood, and you, apart from cybersecurity, stop hacking. But the personnel, there's no verification of training. Yet, if you look in Chapter 2, in Clause 11, it says, check it not just once, but it's ongoing. And that's part of the problem. So coming back to your original question, you've got management, you've got the policies, the procedures, the training. But I think the message I would want to get over to everyone that was in an organization is, you are responsible for quality. It is not a situation where you think, oh, I'll leave it for QA to pick up. QA's oversight. QC and analytical development have to have their own enforcement or verification that work is being done correctly. You can't just, QA will pick it up. That's not a problem. It's the wrong way to look at things. Everyone has to do their job, and they have to be honest. If you look at the FDA's OOS guidance in 2022, the update from the 2006, there's a little footnote that says, under analyst responsibilities, if you know you've made a mistake, like transferring a sample and you dropped a bit, stop. It's perfect. People make mistakes. It is normal. I make a mistake. I'm fairly certain you'll make a mistake, but you won't shout about it as much as I would. Anyway, the point there would be that what you're trying to do is manage the process and manage the people correctly to say, look, I've made a mistake. You document it. You go back to a point where you can start it again without compromising anything. And you then figure out, did you have one of those nights the night before, or was there something wrong with the procedure? What was the problem that really caused that mistake? And it's trying it's getting the culture. That is the biggest thing in the whole of any data governance program, is getting the culture right. And it's another journey, not an event. You can't just send us an email out from the CEO, say, boom, boom, now it's going to be an open culture. This is where you need management to come out and talk to people and persuade people. This is the way we're going to do things. I may have gone on a bit long there.
No, so what you mentioned SOPs, obviously starting at the top, sort of working their way down to the bottom. What role does Q9 play here? Our risk assessments now, is it possible to get through let's say an inspection in 2026 where after this new sets of regulations become finalized, and let's just say they remain largely the same, is it possible to get through an inspection without bringing those risk assessments, those process level or system level risk assessments into the inspection room?
I think you're going to need to show you've done something. I think section 5.1 in Q9 says, and it says, what's the complexity, what's the uncertainty, what's the importance,
novelty.
3 major things.
Yeah.
And I've been in situations where there's been an audit and you've shared user identities. You've got a single log on, you can't attribute anything to anyone. What do? They do a risk assessment. And here's our Excel sheet and our failure mode effect analysis. And we've gone through, and at the end, shock, horror, a cell has turned red. We're out of compliance. What a waste of space. You're sharing user identities. What's the importance? You're out of compliance. What's the uncertainty? None. What's the complexity? None. You've just been a cheap sod and you haven't bought enough user licenses. Fix it. Sorry, I'm very blunt on these sort of things. It's almost like some of our QMM talks, isn't it?
Those were fun. On page 89 of your book, you state that the cost of compliance is always, and you actually say always, comma, always, I imagine to emphasize the always part there, cheaper than the cost of non-compliance. As this has played itself out over the past, let's say, 15 years since DI has become sort of a hot topic, and DG now a very hot topic, it seems to be an inaccurate statement that the cost of compliance is always cheaper. Otherwise,
I disagree.
Companies would not play into this regulatory roulette, which we find ourselves in at the moment. Where, like, almost to follow up on that statement that you just made regarding the shared passwords.
I think what I may not have put it in the book, but I also make the point that if you look at the diagram, you'll see that the cost of compliance is a smaller vertical axis than the cost of non-compliance. And I always say when I do this, when I present it, the cost of compliance is linear and the cost of non-compliance is logarithmic. Because if you look at Ranbaxy,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of the consent decree, they paid the US government $500 million and all the mess that they then had to clear up. And I think the cost of compliance, if you do it right, and it's a case of smarter than harder, because there's this diagram where you map the cost of compliance and I map the cost of compliance, cost of non-compliance. And if you're doing it right, you choose where you're going to be on that diagram. If you've got something that is, say, a planning tool, you're not going to do as much as something that is involved in release of product. And from that perspective, what you're trying to do is put your resources where they're most needed. And that's where risk assessment really comes in. So I think you're going to be using risk assessment, but it's using risk assessment as necessary. I find that failure mode effect analysis is overused. If you're working for Ford making a car, they've got engineering standard J1739, which mandates how you do it, even the time of day you do it, the size of the room, and who does what. But if you're working in pharma, if you're designing something, engineering something, FMEA is very good. But if you're trying to look at a computerized system, for instance, I use a totally different, simpler process for validation for validation of commercially available software. I don't use it for custom software. So you need horses for courses.
Yeah. You mentioned the custom part of the software there, and eventually the workflow that is going to have interaction in humans and machines. And you mentioned FMEA and not always being an appropriate tool. I was reading a little bit of Deming yesterday. As I mean, I just can never get enough of his publications and podcasts and all those. DemingInstitute.org is a great website. Yeah. And he mentions in there like a lot about psychology, how psychology is so important in understanding how to manufacture the highest quality product at the lowest price, because people are involved. And I think that the problem with FMEA is it is not very good at introducing and evaluating the impacts of psychology on a GMP or GXP workflow, because we are so manual. Like you mentioned, Ford being very different manufacturing type, like lots of robots and huge data sets and things like that, where we don't always have that. We're talking about dilutions done under a hood with no data being generated. Talk about the need to address psychology.
But I think the psychology is right. But if you stand back a bit further, psychology is there. But what I think the regulations, the guidance documents, the guidelines, whatever you want to do, actually forgets is that computer system validation is actually should provide business benefit.
Okay.
There's no point for a company to throw shed loads of money to get a pile of what can be most politely called agricultural fertilizer. And the issue there is really there should be business benefit, and you've got to go back and look at the process. If you don't look at the process and the way people work with that process, then you have a major problem.
Because you have no return on that on investment, is what you're saying. Interesting.
Yeah, but you got to get rid of the cottage industry of Excel spreadsheets, the piles of paper, the manual transfers between systems. because the more automation you can put in and you validate and everything else, the bigger the business benefit, which comes back to management being not particularly bright because they're trying to think, how can I reduce the amount of money I spend to make the most profit? But actually, if you could release your product one day earlier, every batch of product one day earlier through investment in digitalization, what would be the cash flow impact on the company?
Yeah, now you're bringing in lean theory here a little bit, touching on it.
Well,
Yeah.
I've never read lean theory. I just look at it as a lab manager in terms of
common sense.
Yeah, common sense. And also, can it get work out the door quicker and people don't spend their time being overpaid secretarial staff, but being well paid, hopefully well paid scientists? Because that's what you want. You want people to have, well, I don't know about a number of people, but I joined to play with the toys.
So you talk about being well-paid scientists there, and what the way I interpret that is, so when I badge into work, what is my purpose for the day? Which, to be a well-paid scientist is, I think that's the words you use there.
Yeah.
What that means to me is focusing on not just doing the tests, the routine tests, but also continuous improvement.
Improvement.
Continual improvement. What is that?
Sorry.
Is that an English thing? That I made a mistake there?
It is. Yeah, you did.
Okay.
Because ICHQ Q10 and Chapter 1 talk about continual. It's a discontinuous process that gives you the ability to do change control, whereas continuous is you make changes at any time. Now, continuous came from ISO 9000. The latest, the current version changed from continuous to continual, I think in 2015, 2016. Sorry. But in Germany, there's no difference between continuous and continual. So it causes a bit of a problem. So I presume you've got German ancestry.
It must be. The evidence is there now. Nice. So as we sort of come to the end of the hour here, I want to ask you, with the new regulation, so that we're talking about the Chapter 4 in Annex 11. Are we, and then we do have some questions in the chat box that I'm gonna get to. Are we better off as an industry with the introduction of these two new regulations, or are we taking a step backward?
From my perspective, I think we're going back. And part of the problem is that I think you're reducing both implementation and inspections to a checklist. Have you got this? Have you got that? Where you have, and a lot of the in an article that I co-authored with Mahbube Lotfinia, someone I'm mentoring from Roche, we actually looked, and she found that there was an awful lot that had been copied and pasted from GLP documents. Now, knowing the composition of the inspectors working, or some of the people in the inspectors working group, I can understand where that came from. But instead of it's you got to have this, you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to do that. A lot of the stuff around IT security, any competent IT department should be doing anywhere. What's it doing in a regulation?
That one really is surprising me, to be honest. Yeah.
Well, unless they were paid by the word, I don't know.
Paid by the word. I hope it doesn't work like that.
Well, I think it's gone from I think Annex 11 is up to over 8,000 words. I mean, if you take the existing Annex 11 clause 9 on audit, 14 on signatures, electronic signatures. I wrote an article some years ago. Why does it take the FDA 640 words that the Europeans can do in 40? Because what it said was, you've got to do this, this. Oh, and that excludes the definitions in Part 11, but we can do it in 40. But now with the new version, you've got sections, you've got 9 clauses in Annex 11. You've got another 11 or so in Chapter 4. And what they all miss is, if we go back to Part 11 discussions 25 years ago, what have we got to sign? Have we got to sign everything? They're forgetting attribution of action within a computerized system.
Oh, it's a big problem.
Oh, there's no discussion about that.
Yep.
And
so
it's
you see 50 e-cigs for one operation out in granulation or something. And it's like,
but people don't read the reg. Because if you look in 211.194 A7, initials or signature of the person performing the test, and A8, initials or signature of the person who's doing the second person review. That's all you need.
That's it.
You don't need anything else. Simple. And what's ironic is you need an SOP for people in Chapter 4. You need an SOP for using initials. But if you look at Section 6 in 617, two of the subclauses, it says initials of the person doing the work, initials of the person reviewing. You only need one signature to release the material from the lab. What are these guys smoking? It's probably why I won't get invited to give a talk to EMA, I suspect.
I'm gonna take a wild guess and say maybe not. That invitation, you might not find that in your inbox anytime soon.
I'm fairly certain I won't get many.
If you were to grade our industry from A to F in 2025, now moving into 2026, regarding the maturity measures you describe in your book, you have a section on maturity and metrics. What would that grade be? We use A to F here in the US. I don't know what
okay, A being the top.
Yeah, B, C, D, E, F.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
I think it depends if you are looking at which part of the industry. If you are looking at the majors, the big mega farm, then you're looking probably in the, depends where you are. If you probably C to B in that sort of area, they're putting a lot of effort in. And what was interesting is I was reviewing for a large pharma company, their new approach to computer validation, where they want to go fully electronic, not just for GMP software, but for non-GMP software. And that was really, really refreshing to see how they could utilize things. Whereas as you go down, I haven't done a CRO audit for a couple of years. I think as you get more into the generic side, it goes down, depends on, because the profit margin is less.
Yeah.
I think you're going to see them lower down the scale. You get one or two really, really all-star labs, but not necessarily right the way across the company, throughout the company, I should say.
All right. And last question for you, just to sort of wrap up this discussion up. For those young professionals listening, and especially with this coming regulation, this might be a stretch to connect these, but let's give it a shot. So for those young professionals listening, or folks new to this industry, what advice do you have for them as they focus professional development for the future? Thinking about the next 10 years when these two regulations, say they're in the DIDG world and within their organization, what should they be focusing on for these next 10 years until we anticipate another change to the regulation?
Okay, that's a fascinating question. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
that. I think the first thing would be read them,
Hmm.
read them again, wait 6 months and read them again.
Hmm.
And the reason for doing that is I would, if we go back to Part 11, I was asked 2 or 3 years ago to be an expert witness for a defense involving interpretation of Part 11 and a contract claim. And what I find is going back and reading the regulation a little bit later
Hmm.
is that you don't just, you look at it once and you make comments, then you read it again, you think, okay, let's modify some of those comments, but give it a little bit more time, or more time is read it constantly, and make, if you are working in the industry, read it, because don't rely on people to interpret it for you.
Hmm.
What you want to do is understand for your, based on your own experience, what that regulation actually is talking about. How would you interpret it? And I think it's important to challenge people to try and, if you're, it could also be an inspector. I mean, look on the bright side, you actually find someone when an inspector comes in that's actually read the regulation. You've got to handle that more carefully, but you know, can you tell me which part of this regulation you're citing us under? I've read
Mhm.
it and I interpret it as this, but I'd like to understand how you're how what have I misunderstood
Yeah, what
something?
am I missing here?
Yeah. And I think it's important. But this is why I'm saying is go back and read them time and time again, not necessarily immediately, but over time, read it, because your interpretation changes
Hmm.
as your knowledge increases and you start to see things like warning letters coming out, you start to see 483s and comments on LinkedIn. I have good job we didn't talk about CSA for starters.
I did
That would have
not bring that
started.
up. I know quite well your thoughts on CSA. I avoided that topic like the plague.
All right, there's another article coming out soon.
Okay.
But the point would be you got to read things and you got to
Hmm.
understand it. And the other, if you get to go to a industry meeting, talk to other people.
Yeah.
It's um,
Yeah.
the one thing I know this is a terrible thing to say. If you go to a meeting, you'll get 30-40% at the presentations in the meeting.
Hmm.
You'll gain 60% of the knowledge in the bar talking to people.
Hmm.
That was always accompanied with a message: I don't want to see a humongous great bar bill from you. But the point would be, if you don't socialize
Hmm.
at these events,
Hmm.
you're going to miss out on a lot of things.
Yeah.
And it's that interaction with people and the contact with people that will help people's development and career.
Hmm.
So it's the soft side of things rather than necessarily the hard side of things.
That's great.
Anything else you want to ask?
I don't, I think that Thank you for that. I think there's a lot of advice and value in
Mm.
in the 1 hour and 6 minutes or so that we've been doing this. I really appreciate you taking the time to do that. There's a
Well,
famous
it's
saying.
an honor being invited, actually.
There's a famous saying out there that, we didn't talk about AI today, but it says that AI is only as good as the data governance underneath it, right? So that,
Yeah, yeah.
uh,
And the data used to train it and
and then
verify
under
it.
that is the data used to, that feeds into your data governance system, et cetera. And so I again want to talk about the book, the data integrity and guidance, published back in 2019. 6, 7 years later, definitely not. I'm not exactly sure how you had the foresight to think this was now going to be actually in the regulation, or maybe you just got lucky.
Neither did I. I would say one thing though,
Yeah.
about the updates of Chapter 1, Chapter 4, Annex 11, because and the glossary is in all of these things is an absolute foobar. The issue is EMA and PICS seem to do things in a silo mentality. There's very little interaction between groups, cross-reference to other things.
Hmm.
It should be a lot easier. I mean, there's stuff in Annex 11 talking about what should be in a contract. Go and read it in Chapter 7. That's where it's supposed to be, outsourcing.
Hmm.
It's about data governance. Shouldn't be in Annex 11 or Chapter 4. They should be in Chapter 1.
Ah, interesting.
Because you've got elements. If you look in Section 3 about pharmaceutical quality system in Annex 11, it's got the role of management. But they've got to understand computerized systems. Why not put that in Chapter 1 where you've got management responsibilities? Or am I being silly?
I don't think so. It's very I always try to interpret it through the lens of Q9 when I read the new Annex 11. And if you do that, if you really just always almost like have them side by side, it makes a little bit more sense. Like, okay, I can take this through the lens of Q9 and interpret it. But that shouldn't really, that you shouldn't need to do that when you read a regulation, right? You
I
shouldn't need to understand so much context and other things to figure out what they're trying to tell us.
I think you see you take it through Q9. I turn it around and I look at it through my role as I still think when I work as a consultant, I still think of myself in as a lab manager. What would I do if I
Hmm.
wanted, and if you don't put yourself in that sort of role, how can you help other people is my, and I look at it from the perspective of how can I make the job easier? How can I make the process faster? And if you look at the, you didn't mention the fact I've got two editions of validation of chromatography data systems. And the one thing that in the first edition, meeting business and regulatory requirements. For more for marketing. So business requirements came first, regulatory, because if you get the business right, the compliance comes from nothing.
Yeah,
Second edition was
totally
meeting
agree with
data
that.
integrity, business and regulatory requirements, more for marketing. But the point was really trying to come back to making certain that things work correctly. And if you get it right, you really don't have the issue of worrying about inspections because you are inspection ready by definition.
Hmm.
And that's really what you want.
I think that's a perfect way to end this I'll end this and this webcast on a great note. So thanks, Bob, for
Thank
your
you very
time,
much.
as mentioned, and you know, looking forward to the next publication on CSA. Can't wait for that one to come out. I'm sure we'll.
I'll tell you what the title is after we've finished.
Oh man. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining. And as I mentioned, this will be available on the website for anyone on demand. Thanks for everyone who joined us for
Thank you.
today.
Yes.
Yeah. It's been a pleasure, Bob, and looking forward to what the future holds in 2026 with this new regulation. Let's see what happens.
My guess is you won't see it before 27. They've
Too
left it too
much
late.
concern. Yeah.
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 Yeah.